Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is Dauphiné Stage 2, 2022. Now, we remember yesterday's stage, exciting finish. Wout van Aert won with ease, what it looked like, coming across the line, not even breathing. Puts on the yellow jersey, so Jumbo-Visma are in the hot seat here, starting Stage 2 with Wout van Aert, the race leader here at Dauphiné. Now, when you look at the profile of Stage 2 at 170 kilometers, there's 4 climbs on today's stage, but it has to be the climb with just under 70 kilometers to go, just under 12 kilometers and about 4%. But it says about 12 kilometers. There's really another 10 or 15 kilometers of climbing right after this KOM of today's stage. So when you're talking about the sprinters like Dylan Groenewegen, Bike Exchange, we saw him get dropped yesterday and they couldn't get him back on. They came close to within about 20 seconds to the tail end of the Peloton yesterday with about 5 kilometers to go, but they couldn't make it. Now today you got a massive climb. Says, like I said, 12 kilometers, but it's really more, about 20 if not 25 kilometers to the top of that climb that starts just under 70 kilometers to go. When the cameras come on, there's 6 riders up the front. It's Oliver Legac from FDJ, Anders Skarseth, X, Alexi Virmos from Total Energies. Now Alexi Virmos has had top 15 results in Grand Tours like the Tour de France Enduro, I believe it was, and has won a stage of the Tour de France. So we know for Virmos, this is quality rider. Kevin Vermaak from DSM has won LBL, the Under 23 Youth Edition. So we know he's got some quality. Now, the other riders in the break, they got some more company there in the form of Anthony De La Place from Arkea Samsic and Zanders Vervlasmos from Lotto Soudal. Those 6 riders, they got a 4-minute gap, and the group being led behind from Bike Exchange and Jumbo-Visma. Not spending a ton of energy. Look like there's just 1 and 2 riders back there riding, trying to control this breakaway of 6. When we start the big climb with 67 kilometers to go, up front, the group of 6 have a sizable gap, still at just about 4 minutes, 10 seconds, on the Peloton being led by Bike Exchange behind and Jumbo-Visma still. Now, Dylan Groenewegen comes off early in this climb. He's got some company right away with 2 teammates. A little bit faster than we saw at yesterday's Stage 1, but I want to point something out. Right before Dylan Groenewegen comes off, take a look at the pictures here and see how his teammates are all spread out through the Peloton, and Dylan Groenewegen is coming out the back with just 2 teammates instead of his whole team riding back there. Now, later, he does get 5 teammates back there, so they got 6 Bike Exchange guys riding. But remember, they still got 1 rider they left up at the front. It's called Nick Schultz. Now, Schultz, I don't know exactly what Bike Exchange were thinking. Why ride the whole stage up to the beginning of this climb and then still leave a teammate like Nick Schultz up in the front group? Now, I went back and I had to check out his resume. He's been pro for about 4 years, and he has 2 wins throughout that time. So there's not a lot of chances for Nick Schultz winning today's stage. But of course, Dylan Groenewegen is not much of a climber either, because this big climb here at just about 20-25 kilometers long. So we know Dylan Groenewegen chances of getting over this are slim. But if you're going to ride the whole team to begin with, why not ride the whole team right now for Dylan Groenewegen and drop everybody back? They don't, and Dylan Groenewegen's back there losing time throughout this climb. When they go over the KOM, the group of 6 became 5 because a Lotto Soudal rider dropped off early here on this Category 2 climb. Now, with that group of 5, they're working well together. Everybody's taking solid pulls up there. Nobody's missing any action on the front. They're all pulling hard. We go back to the Peloton behind. It's being driven now by EF Education. When Dylan Groenewegen dropped off the back, Ineos jumped on the front too. They started pulling with those 2 riders setting the hard pace of the Peloton. That gap back there to Dylan Groenewegen's Bike Exchange led Chase group back there is going to lose over a minute by the time they hit the KOM, and then just purge time throughout the rest of this stage. Up front in the Peloton, though, it's EF Education's Jumbo-Visma sitting on back there. Ineos are riding hard with 1 rider, and then Trek Segafredo's jumping in from time to time throughout the stage, but not 100% dedicated like we saw in yesterday's Stage 1. With 25 kilometers to go in the Peloton, it's still being led back there by Ineos, Jumbo-Visma, and EF Education. About 5 riders pulling. Now, when we go back up to the front of the group, though, it's still 5 riders up there pulling. That's even Steven right there. Not a real remarkable amount of effort being displayed from the peloton behind. Certainly the riders that are working are pulling hard, but normally when you start trying to bring back a group of 5 on a stage like this, you want big numbers back there to do damage when that time gap was above 4 minutes on today's stage. Now, they got it at about 1:40 with 25 kilometers to go, so the gap is still doable at this point in time if we get some help from some of the other teams back there. When we come into the next big obstacle with about 10 kilometers to go, it's the last climb here on today's stage 2, and it's 1.2 kilometers long at about 5%. A stiff little climb, but not so stiff that the 5 breakaway riders up front will come apart on this 1.2 kilometer climb. They're intelligent, they stay together, they work well together up this 5% climb, and when they crest the top, their gap is just over 30 seconds. Behind starting the climb with 10 kilometers to go, it's Trek Segafredo on the front. They got 3 riders, Antoine Tolhoek, Kenny Ellison, and Tom Skoonge. Now, Tom Skoonge, he'd already been riding the front earlier. He comes off quickly at the beginning of this climb. Antoine Tolhoek is pushing hard on the pedals, trying to bring back this group of 5 that's got a gap of 40 seconds. Now, Kenny Ellison comes through at the top, does a big acceleration. It's Steven Kruijswijk, Jumbo-Visma, that's on his wheel when they crest the KOM. Kenny Ellison looks back. He sees he's got to slow up and ease up. We'll see the chicken arm flick from Steven Kruijswijk from Jumbo-Visma. That means the rider does not have any fitness at this point in time. His legs are done. He looks right over his shoulder. See as all Jumbo-Visma lined up on his wheel, then digs hard and tries to close the gap to Kenny Ellison. Now, they up front, the group of 5, remember, what goes up has to come down. They got a gap just over 30 seconds on the peloton behind, and it's all downhill. We look at the speedometer from the motorcycle. He's doing 80 plus kilometers an hour, and he's behind the brake. Pretty hard if you're in the peloton back there to bring this break of 5 back if you only got 2 guys pulling, and Steven Kruijswijk clearly doesn't have good legs. Kenny Ellison did the big hit going over the final of this climb, so you know his legs have got to be coming apart. And let me remind you guys, Kenny Ellison's not a big guy, so there's not a bunch of power, and we're going down the descent right now in the tuck position, so nobody can gain on anyone. When we hit the bottom, it's Steven Kruijswijk leading out of the right turn. Kenny Ellison sprinting on the pedals there, trying to close the gap to Jumbo-Visma rider up front. The break up the road at 5, they're still working well together. And here's the problem when you're trying to bring back a group like this. Every time on roads like this that are just undulating, going up and down, the climbs are a little bit stiff, but not so hard to have broken up this group of 5. And every time there's a descent, whoever's on the front's working hard, but the rest of the guys are in the tuck back there. They got fresh legs. So every time the road rises up just a little bit, that breakaway at 5, there's someone back there that's got fresh legs that have just sat on just enough to be able to power over a few hundred meters to keep the speed high in that group of 5. Now behind, it's Kenny Ellison, the Trek Segafredo rider. He's getting on the radio because he needs some help. It's only Steven Kruijswijk in front of him. Kenny Ellison's legs are starting to fall apart. We'll see Tom Skoonge come back to the front from Trek Segafredo. But remember, Tom had already been pulling earlier and came off on the climb with 10 kilometers to go here on this final stage 2. Now, when we look back up front, finally Ineos are back to the front. They're doing some pulling. And then all of a sudden, Tiesj Benoot comes to the front with 4 kilometers to go. Tiesj Benoot looks back over his shoulder, throws his hand out there, waving to everyone like, hey, who's going to help me? Hey, Tiesj Benoot, if you win yesterday with Wout van Aert and that kind of style and you haven't touched the front yet, the gap to the front group of 5 is doable if you quit messing around and just get on the pedals and throw down. Tiesj Benoot wants to play with the guys behind trying to ask for help. He only pulls for about 100, 200 meters max. And then it's Steven Kruijswijk that comes back to the front. Remember, Steven Kruijswijk was done at the top of that last summit, and he's been pulling his heart out as 100% as he can, but there's not much form left in his legs. Wout van Aert gets on the radio. Few moments after that, we see Primož Roglič come up to the left side of Wout van Aert. Wout van Aert gives him the look. Primož Roglič knows what he has to do. He's got to go to the front. As he's going to the front, Tiesj Benoot's looking back. I'm sure at this moment, Tiesj Benoot's thinking like, oh man, Primož, don't take too big of a pull because my legs are already hurting even though I've only done 200 meters in this stage 2. as Primož Roglič was going to the front. It was Steven Kruijswijk dropping out the back. His legs are done and blown. And now Christophe Laporte is lined up on Primož Roglic's wheel because Tiesj Benoot will pull off when Primož Roglič comes to the front. When you add up the total amount of time that Tiesj Benoot rode on the front, if we even add in the time he spent waving his hand back there trying to get some help, he probably pulled for about 400, maybe 600 meters total in today's stage, and then blew with Primož Roglič coming to the front. Roglič is digging hard on the pedals. Christophe Laporte is sitting second wheel. Wout van Aert's third. Christophe Laporte will come up to the right side of Primož Roglič. They'll bump shoulders. Then Christophe Laporte will take over at the front with about 1.5 kilometers to go. The gap up to the 5 riders now is just under 30 seconds, and you can see they're in sight. Now Christophe Laporte's digging hard on the pedals. Wout van Aert's locked onto his wheel. Now with 1K to go, we got to go back up to the group of 5 because this is when the cameras leave the peloton. As the group of 5, when they come under the banner, it's Vermos Total Energy that's got the first position. He'll sling off. Kevin Vermark from DSM, the American rider, will take the next pull. He'll go through the couple little turns here, and then with 700 meters to go, it's Legac from FDJ that takes over. He doesn't throw in a huge acceleration, but he keeps the pace high, so you know the peloton's working hard behind. Now with 500 meters to go, it's De La Place, Arkea Samsic that throws in the first attack. Now throughout this stage too, this group of 5 have worked marvelous together. Everybody taking pulls. While I was sitting on the couch, I never saw anybody play any games or miss any turns. And here with De La Place throwing in the first big attack, he looks back. He's got everybody lined up on his wheel more or less. And then the peloton start coming into the picture. He'll swing to the left side of the road, sit up, and then with 350 meters to go, FDJ's Legac that throws in the next attack. He's got a gap on Vermos back there from Total Energy. Vermos is trying to close the gap, but the gap up to Legac looks pretty solid, and it looks as though Legac FDJ's got a chance here of winning stage 2. Now it's X Garces sitting on Vermos' wheel. Vermos is still accelerating the whole time, trying to bring back Legac. As he's getting closer and closer, we start to see the legs fall off the FDJ rider. He sits down for a brief moment, then gets back up, starts his acceleration again. Just behind, it's Vermos from Total Energy that's now starting to close the gap up to the wheel of the FDJ rider. He'll swing off to the left with 75 meters to go. They're side by side with 25 meters to go. It's a 3-way battle to the line because the X rider Skarsev, he found his way up, and now we're 3 wide going for the win here on stage 2 behind the peloton. They're not going to catch. They waited too long. Up front in the group of 3, it's Vermos with the big acceleration to the line. He'll win today's stage and take the race leader's yellow jersey here at Dauphiné. Second on the stage is X Garces. Third to be Legac for the FDJ rider who threw in the big attack with 350 meters to go. Holds on for a podium position here on stage 2. Now behind in the peloton, of course, it's Wout van Aert that wins the sprint, but he's a few seconds off. So like I said, it's Vermos, the Total Energy, that wins today's stage and gets the race leader's jersey. Now, when I break it down, when I really look at this stage close, it's easy to see how this group of 5 stayed off. No matter at any point in time when you look at this stage, there was never big numbers back there of riders pulling, and most of the time it was singles from Trek Segafredo, EF Education, Ineos, and Jumbo-Visma back there working. Never with big numbers, never pulling. When riders got tired, you didn't see fresh riders come to the front. And I'm going to point out Christophe Laporte because at the top of the last KOM here with about 9 kilometers to go, when Steven Kruijswijk was throwing that chicken arm out, hoping that a teammate or some other rider could close the gap up to Kenny Yellowzone, that was the moment that Christophe Laporte had to make the call at that moment to start pulling and start pulling 100%. Now, I pointed him out yesterday when it was Remy Cavagna that threw in the big attack from Quickstep with 1.6 kilometers to go. And it was Christophe Laporte that I gave huge praise to for closing that gap. If you remember right, he looked back, realized he had no teammates to close the gap, so he did it himself, closed the gap to Remy Cavagna, the quick-step rider, and then Wout van Aert won the stage. Now, when you look at that 9 kilometers at the last of the KOM, Christophe Laporte, when he saw Steven Kruijswijk throw out that chicken arm, he should have realized at that point in time Steven Kruijswijk does not have the form to bring back a group of 5. With 9 kilometers to go, just over 30 seconds, I want to say it was about 33 seconds to that group of 5. And remember, the next 1 kilometer is going to be downhill where that group is doing at least 60, 70, 80 kilometers an hour on that descent, so you can't pull back time there. It had to be Christophe Laporte's job at that moment to close that gap and seal up a chance at the victory here for Wout van Aert. Instead, Christophe Laporte, he made a mistake here on today's stage, trying to save his legs so he could lead out Wout van Aert. He waited all the way till about 1.5 kilometers to go, which was way too late to pull back a group of 5 up the road. So big praise for Christophe Laporte decision making and split decision making on yesterday's stage 1, but today he dropped the ball. When you look at Jumbo-Visma, they didn't ride up the big 20-kilometer long climb with 67 kilometers to go. They let other teams do it, no big deal. But that last moment with 9 kilometers to go, you can't hesitate at that point in time. Christophe Laporte, you got to close the gap. And remember, this is why I'm putting the blame here on Christophe Laporte. You're coming in here as Jumbo-Visma with a team with GC riders, right? Steven Kruijswijk's a climber. Primoz Roglic is riding for GC. Jonas Vingegaard is going to ride for GC and a pure climber. Wout van Aert is your sprinter for this stage, so he can't pull. And then you look at Chris Harper, who'd already ridden the front, gotten dropped by this point in time because he rode throughout this whole stage. It doesn't leave you much power left on the front. So Christophe Laporte has to be that glue between the early riders and closing the gap up to these breakaway riders, because there's too many GC guys here on Jumbo-Visma to let other teams do it. Now, it was a big mistake. It'll cost Wout van Aert a chance at a stage victory here. And let me remind you guys, there was a 10-second time bonus if he won today's stage. So he could have added another 10 seconds to all the GC favorites here at Dauphiné. Now, there was an interview earlier in the stage from Wout van Aert. He says he doesn't believe he can ride for GC and that he'll lose the general classification to Primoz Roglic, hopefully come this weekend when we get into the big mountain stages. Was an exciting stage. Always fun when you watch the breakaway riders make it all the way to the finish. And remember, when you see a breakaway make it all the way to the finish, there's always a reason for it, because there's always more power back in the Peloton than there is up front. And today's reason was easy and simple. Jumbo-Visma dropped the ball. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next edition, Stage 2 of Dauphiné.